Come on. BroDiallo Show, Q4 Radio. Sorry. BroDiallo Show, Q4 Radio, coming through live and direct. Today is, oh, there we go. Hold on. Oh, Q4 Radio, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing. All right. My headphones had a little lag in them. But anyway, let's get this done appropriate. BroDiallo Show, Q4 Radio. Today is April 5th, in the year of your Lord 2021. I'm broadcasting straight out of the sanctuary hypocrisy that is the city of Chirac, state of Illinois, in the United States of America, on the ravaged planet Earth. Good. Yeah, that's how it's supposed to sound. All right. Welcome everybody to BroDiallo Show on Q4 Radio. I'm very happy to be broadcasting quarantine radio, social distance radio, broadcasting through the transmitter of Q4, but from the safety of my cave, my home, my family room. So I'm really happy that we were able to resume Q4 radio broadcast in a safe way. Shout out to the Q4 radio staff. Q4 is suffering a major contraction right now. The owner of the facilities where the studio and the broadcast space is set up is evicting us. So please, any support you can have for Q4. I'm just be real with you. You're not going to find progressive, uncensored, non-corporate sponsored voices in the atmosphere available to the community or to the world if we don't support it in an independent basis. Corporations and governments and moneyed, wealthy interests are not going to provide you with the information to advocate for taking away their power, to organize or mobilize or educate the masses for taking away their power. So it is up to we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it's won. We have to make a deliberate and a militant effort to support independent radical media. Seriously. And I don't mean liberal media, I don't mean democratic media. I'm even going beyond progressive media. I mean revolutionary media. Media that calls for the subversion of the status quo by any means necessary, unapologetic. We are in what is called the brave new world. Information it's long been weaponized. I mean, Catholic Church, the early Catholic Church, which is the inventor of what we identify as modern propaganda, has weaponized information for well over 1,000 years, a millennia, eons. But recent, relatively new, within our lifetime, has information become a commodity. And for the longest time, radical thinkers believed that the future would hold a condition where the masses of the people would be denied information. Information will be locked away from us, and we will be severely punished or sanctioned by our oppressors if we try to access, unlock, or distribute information. Orwell believed or taught that in his book 1984 that the government would tightly control information. They would rewrite information. They would limit access to information. And for so long in the real world, we would always look for evidence of censorship, book burnings, and hidden away documentation, top secret. Lo and behold, we're now finding out that our oppressors went the other way. that way, not this way. Our oppressors decided instead of limiting information, they learned through the Watergate, they learned through the finding and releasing of the COINTELPRO papers, that hiding information away from the masses of the people only provoked a desire for that information. It only drove individuals to seek it out aggressively. And those few people who had the technical skills or the professional skills as investigators or journalists, the few people who would dig that information out that the government and corporations, those in power, tried to hide from us and distribute it to the people, those people would become instant celebrities, folk heroes, honored members of the journalistic community. So just before, because the government had the internet since the 50s and 60s. They were the military. Go look at the history of DARPA, military research. So they knew everything that goes through the military technology eventually becomes available to the masses. The way this economy works is that the masses, the people, socialism, funds research for new technology and innovation, and we pay taxes to the government as a collective. The government hires scientists on the government payroll, socialism, and then they come up with everything from microwaves to MRI machines to the internet, fiber optics, batteries, special, those lithium batteries. Governments create these things, and then politicians who are funded by private interests and corporations turn that technology over to businesses, and then those businesses privatize it and sell it back to us, sell our technology, sell our collective work back to us, our public work, our public invention back to us for a private profit. So they knew about the internet 2 decades or more before we had it, and they knew the internet would be a new instrument. The leaks that were coming out in the 60s were going to pale in comparison to what the masses of the people could get in the 90s and 2000s. And in fact, this is called the information age. So the leaders figured out very cleverly, there's this notion that the people who dominate us are incompetent, stupid, and they put up front people like old mumbling, bumbling Biden, that old school Jim Crow racist, or George Bush. Remember old George Bush? They draw cartoons of him looking like a chimp with big ears. They put up these bumbling politicians, and we think the people who rule over us are stupid. George Bush is stupid. Biden is stupid, and the politicians say things, and we think, wow, it's very obvious what this politician is saying is untrue. Do they think I'm stupid? They must be stupid. But the people who dominate the world they're smart. They're brilliant. So they said, as we release this internet, turn it over to private individuals like Zuckerberg and Bezos to make billions of dollars, and they pretend like they're the innovators when all innovation has been a collective socialistically funded and developed endeavor. That's a whole nother part of the discussion. I don't want to get wrapped up here, but they understood we're going to make information, instead of hiding it, censoring it, editing it, like in an Orwellian state, we're going to saturate information. We're going to bombard people with so much information that when information comes out like the Panama Papers, like collateral death, like when an organization forms WikiLeaks to just dump all this information on people of all this death and corruption and oppression, demonstrating the unworthiness of billionaires, all the theft, that people will be overwhelmed. Our minds did not evolve to take in this much information over such a short period of time. So now there is no censorship, and everybody has as much information as they want at their fingertips, yet individuals are as dumb and ill informed as any other time in human existence. Like we have more quantity of information, but we have the lowest quality of information, and we are losing the capacity to comprehend, to process, to articulate, to, in appropriate functional ways, share information with each other. Information has become commodified. It's like McDonald's. Information under the information age or in the internet age, it's like food under McDonald's. It looks like food, it smells like food, it's everywhere, it even tastes like food, but there's something, certain elements missing, certain enzymes for digestion. And food is supposed to enrich your body, energize your body, and make you healthy. But the food that has is now slugging you down, tearing you down, giving you cancer, killing you. So when you do find organic, non GMO, pure, non corporate information, we need to support it. We need to support it in every way possible. We need to be able to sift through, to filter. We need to adapt to the information age. We no longer have to struggle to get information. Now the struggle is to properly process and information. We have to decommodify information and knowledge. We have to relocalize it in many respects. So I know my voice is a voice in the wilderness, and I make appeals to the community to be engaged, active listeners by supporting the broadcast, supporting Q4, supporting me through sharing, liking, subscribing. When you do find a source of information, try to be a broadcaster of that voice, a promoter, an unofficial agent, part of the street team. I wouldn't be here if I don't think I had something of value for my community. I could be doing a lot of other stuff, but I think what I'm doing here is an asset. I think this program makes a positive contribution to the just aspiration. And I can't say, I'm human. When I see people getting on the airways, spreading misinformation, when I see people with radio programs promoting nonsense like black privilege and black entrepreneurial capitalism as a means to overcoming oppression and ecocide, when I see a lot of people who got no love for the people, miseducating people, further entrenching menticide in our community, and they getting all this love and support, I can't say I don't feel some type of way. And I'm not just me, my personality does not suit the martyrdom. I'm not a martyr type of dude. I'm not even though I'm of the working class, I'm a man of the people, I'm a struggler. I don't like that underdog status. Let me say, I'm down for a fight, even against overwhelming odds, but I ain't gonna stay the underdog if I don't need. It's like Claude Anderson said, blessed is the heart. Um, when you got power, exercise power, and I'm trying to get power. I want Black revolutionary media to be the standard for all Black media, not this minstrel show owned, directed, guided, financed by our oppressors. So anyway, I don't know if you follow Q4 family on, but the station manager made an announcement about our dire straits at Q4. So keep us in your prayers. Or you could do something relevant, step up, help uh, promote the show, promote the movement for progressive media in Chicago and across the world, or in your local community. If you got some radical screaming in the wilderness, help bring him into the light and help that person get out. We need revolutionary, progressive, rational, secular black media. Anyway, in this brave new world. Of course, I'm gonna have to open up about DMX. Um, wow, I have a lot to say about DMX. I mean, I think he embodies this concept that I call the victim versus the vector. He came out with a book several years ago. I got a copy around here somewhere, Earl, that talks about his life, and it's a hard read, man. Gosh, choke. I can't even recount what DMX went through. Make you choke up. But really, it impacted me because it did parallel in a lot of ways my own experience. And DMX recently came out and said when he was as young as 14, one of his mentor, one of the men that he looked up to, spiked his joint with PCP or crack cocaine, and DMX kind of came up and came was growing up and consuming every ounce of hip hop and fully entrenched in the hip hop culture. And anyway, he's a person who's a victim of the drug wars, of the deliberate uh, subversion of the black community, the black communal, the black family structure, the divestment, COINTELPRO. I mean, DMX was, as a child, as a young man, a victim of high level psychological operations through the media, through corruption of schools. He was a victim of biochemical warfare through the drug warfare. He was a victim of state repression through the welfare system, juvenile justice system, through the housing projects and child services system. I mean, DMX entire life is a biography of repression, of moving black people from the state of Jim Crow, from chattel slavery to Jim Crow to what was called in the 80s and 90s benign neglect. All of these insidious agendas carried out, conceptualized and carried out by white people and their non-white agents against the black community in order to prevent, as the COINTELPRO paper says, the rise of a black messiah. And the reason they wanted to prevent the quote unquote rise of a black messiah is because they wanted to subvert black liberation and empowerment. And DMX literally was born and raised at the time when all those forces converged. And every single insidious anti black agenda impacted DMX's life directly. Many of us as well. Some of us were spared, some of us came up under racism, but fortunately, you didn't have to deal with drug addiction. Maybe your parents and family members or your immediate guardians and caretakers weren't addicted to crack, or maybe even though you had your father or someone in your family had substance abuse or alcoholism, maybe they were functional alcoholics, so you lived in a relatively economically stable environment, two-car garage, suburban type situation. Maybe even if you had a really bad home life, your school was a functional school, so you got refuge. I mean, that's one of the things I had. I had a aunt who paid for me and my sister to go to private school. So even though we lived in a chaotic home, we got to go to a school that wasn't plagued by violence and shootings and gang domination. Um, so maybe some of the issues, some of the subversion, some of the genocidal tactics, because that's what it is, what is called a slow moving genocide. Some of us got parts of it. Some of us, our parents, our environment, our own intelligence allowed us to navigate and not get the full brunt. But if you read DMX's life, every single one of the insidious anti-black agenda that were formulated in his early childhood or just before he was born, he was hit every single bang, bang, bang from every angle. So he was a victim. But what happens with a lot of victims under systems and institutions of oppression outside of revolutionary struggle is that many victims become vectors. And what a vector is in a medical sense is normally an insect or another animal that is afflicted with a disease, but they're not simply afflicted with a disease, they also facilitate the spread of the disease that they're infected with. So you have a normally diseased individual or animal that is simply sick. Take, for instance, someone suffering from cancer. Generally, most forms of cancer are not communicable. They can't spread. So you can sit in the room with someone with cancer. If your lover or spouse is has cancer, you can sleep in the bed with them. You can spend time with them, even though they're sick, because it's not generally contagious. They're not going to spread it to you. But of course, there are other diseases like let me guess, COVID-19, where the disease is contagious. So if your lover or spouse is infected with COVID-19, then you have to isolate from them because they will spread it to you. So one disease just makes you a sick individual in need of help. Another disease makes you a sick individual in need of help, but also in need of certain limitations on your ability to move and to contact other people because you can spread that disease. One of the main diseases, like rabies. It's nothing sadder to see a small mammal or some cute animal infected with rabies. And your heart goes out to that animal. But at the same time, you can't go over and handle that animal and help that animal. Whereas you see an animal with a broken leg on the side of the road, you can maybe go help that animal. But a rabid animal, ain't much you can do for it because it is a vector. It will spread the disease to you. And some vectors, even they can spread the disease without being affected by the disease. So anyway, I kind of applied that to psychological and social conditions because there's a lot of Black people in our community who are victims and they deserve our support, our help, our sympathy. But a lot of Black people take their pain, take their mental, psychological, physical limitations and ailments, and instead of working on that, containing that, trying to heal from that, they just want to spread it around to everybody else. R. Kelly, victim of child molestation and a perpetrator of predatory sexual behavior. So DMX, complex individual, if you listen to his music, he talks about a lot of things in his life that I'm sharing here, and your heart goes out to the brother. But if you know about his life in terms of the domestic abuse and his problems with his children, you're like, wow, a lot of the pain he got, he gave back. And not just through music and expression, but through harming other people. And that's hard for us to deal with. And a lot of times people are like, don't bring it up. You know, there are memes on the internet right now talking about how our grandmothers, how our elders would sleep things under the rug. Incest and child molestation and I don't know a Black grandmother from the hood that wasn't, because I didn't have the vocabulary then, but my own grandmother, she was an enabler. And I understand what it's like to be an enabler. You know, I finally sympathize, you know, with that. But we always talk about how grandmothers would sweep things under the rug. Oh, baby, that boy's touched. He funny like that. They come up with ways to excuse behaviors that are criminal, that harm us for generations. And we some of us lash out at our Black elders. Like, yeah, you know, they should have dealt with some of this stuff. They should have been on top of some of this stuff. They should have confronted some of these issues instead of trying to sweep it under the rug. But even now, some of these same progressive, conscious, enlightened people are still digitally sweeping things under the rug. Oh, don't bring that up in this time. They tell you don't bring up issues at a time where the issues people are most sensitive and most prepared to hear the issues, because this is when it's quote unquote in this era we say trending. It has been brought to our attention. It's kind of like when the Republicans say you can't talk about gun violence after a mass shooting because that's insensitive. But then when there's no mass shooting or no news story trending about gun violence, nobody cares. Nobody's going to listen to you. So the only time you can really talk about gun violence and have people pay attention to you is after a gun tragedy, after an atrocity, after a mass shooting. So if I talked about DMX 2 months ago, so all I'm saying is we can live, and he wanted this. DMX wanted his life to be out there. DMX said, I put my pain out there. I put my words. I'm honest with my fans. I'm real with my fans for a reason. So how you claim to be a DMX fan and you can't be real about who DMX was? He was, we like to say, a complex figure. That's a nice way of saying something else about people. He was a complex figure. And I just think we need to think more about, we got a lot of damaged people in our community. Not all of them are multi-platinum rappers. Some of them just work regular jobs. Some of them just live regular lives. But we have to stop this victim vector cycle. We have to make a conscious effort not to perpetuate the pain and the harm that we suffer through oppression. We need to redirect. We need to stop the maladaptations that we have developed to cope with living under oppression. We basically have to be revolutionary and radical, but that's the solution, but in a roundabout way. I can't even say that I was a fan. When DMX hit, it was the height of my clubbing. I was in my 20s, and it was the height of my clubbing days. And my clubbing, I used to, my two things was hip hop and reggae. So I'd go to the hole in the wall spots over on Nostrand Ave, down on Church Avenue. They used to have these restaurants, and when the lights went down on the weekends, they turned into to reggae clubs, dance halls, you know, Kilimanjaro, Stone Love. That was Brooklyn. But hip hop was in Manhattan. This was in the era of the Limelight, the Tunnel, the Sound Factory, the Buddha Bar, Irving Plaza. I was right there. And DMX hit the scene like boom, like wow. And I was really impressed. Like my mind was blown when I first saw the video for Get At Me Dog. It was raw. And I was East Coast hip hop was my thing. I was in the East Coast, West Coast, none of the above. I'm from Cali, went to Chi. Them niggas showed me love, But I picked a side. I wasn't like Common. Common said that he didn't want to pick a side. I picked a side. I was West all the way. No Tupac. I never bought no Tupac albums. I didn't go to no Tupac shows, no Death Row, Snoop. I'm like, nah, I'm strictly Biggie. Back then, I picked a side. I was mad loyal to the East. I was more loyal to the East Coast hip hop than East Coast hip hop was loyal to itself. And this is before, you know, New York rappers started imitating everybody else. But now New York, they want to be the South, they want to be the West, they want to be Chicago. You got New York drill rappers, Bloods and Crips in New York. When I was in New York, there wasn't no Bloods and Crips in New York. They had sets, the D-Seps, the low lifes, but they didn't have gangs like Set and Color Tripping like that. But, and I used to always joke, you can't have gangs in New York because you can't do drive-bys. Look at the traffic. You can never really set up gang culture in a place where you can't even do drive-bys. But anyway, I digress. But at this time, when Rough Riders dropped, and even though I was a hip hop head, I was conscious. I was a conscious black dude. So when DMX came out with this Rough Riders, I hated that. I hated that. I hated Rough Riders. And at this time, for some reason, in the early to mid 90s, that's when black artists really wanted to adopt any white or non-black degenerate concept for their music. You had the Fugees, back before they were the Fugees or the Refugee, they were the Translator crew, blunted on reality. Go check that early album. It's like experimental hip hop. It's really cool. All y'all know about the score, but if you're a real Fugees fan, you know about Translator crew, blunted on reality. But they would talk about we're Haitian Sicilians, the firm. Like all these black people want to be mafiosos. You know, they be calling, yeah, I'm Nikki, I'm Paulie, all these black artists. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why are all these Murder Inc., Irv Gotti? Like, why are all these black artists in the 90s all of a sudden adopting the most racist anti-black culture and concepts into the community in the hood? Before it was MC Busy Bee, you know, we just make stuff up. Boogie Down Productions, Poor Righteous Teachers, Jungle Brothers, De La Soul. Like, why did all of a sudden black people wanted to be Bugsy Siegel? And so I was always, because I read history, I was a student of history, it hit different to hear black people. Even then, y'all not gonna believe me. In 94, 95, there was even a black clan. There was this rap group, and it's the same guy that produced albums on X Clan, the Black Watch movement on Eastern Parkway. If you know X Clan and Eastern Parkway, that's the Black Watch movement they had there, right over by the Brooklyn Museum. The same guy that got production credits on To the East Blackwards started producing this. I think his name was Chaz or Shaz. He was an MC, and his crew was called the Black Clan. And they would dress up in all black Ku Klux Klan outfits with the hood and everything. We even had a black KKK and a black mafia, Black Murder Inc. Capone. How many Capones and Noriegas? Noriega. Al Capone. And so that was kind of like really hampered. That really put salt in my game. I just couldn't, because I'd be in the club and I hear the I'm Bugsy Siegel. I'm like, no, you're not. I'm Capone. No, you're not. You're not. We're Murder Inc. No, you're not. Even Biggie Smalls. He used to call himself the Black Frank White, King of New York. We were pretending to be white gangsters, Jewish gangsters, even Latin American cartel gangsters. And so here come the Rough Riders at that same time. And I would say nobody listened to me. Y'all probably not going to listen to me now. But do you know who the Rough Riders under Theodore Roosevelt back in 1898? Do you know about the Spanish-American War? Do you know that the Rough Riders was a military regiment that went down to Cuba and slaughtered thousands of unarmed, innocent black people that committed atrocities in Latin America and the Caribbean? That was founded by a racist man, Theodore Roosevelt. And even before, just go to Google images and put in Theodore Roosevelt equestrian statue. Just Google it. I shouldn't even tell you, but y'all not going to Google it, but let me describe it to you. And this is in New York. This ain't in the South. This ain't Alabama. This ain't Memphis. This ain't Florida or Texas. This is New York City. Ethnically diverse, progressive, democratic city. And they had this big ass statue of Theodore Roosevelt sitting on a horse. And he has on one side of him, let me orient, I think on his left side is an African slave. And on his right side is a Native American with the full regalia, with the headdress. And he's on a horse riding ahead of these two savages, bringing them to the light of civilization. This was before. This was Theodore, his one of his most, and this giant 10-foot tall statue sitting on a 10-foot pedestal. Over, you just put it. They had to take it down. This was before the protest. This is nobody think Theodore Roosevelt wasn't a Southern cracker, a Confederate. He was a loyal American. Look it up. Just Google Theodore Roosevelt equestrian statue. This was the man who founded and led the Rough Riders, who slaughtered. And another thing about Rough Riders are celebrated in American history because they were the founders of American imperialism. Up until the Rough Riders, the United States was an isolationist, non-interventionist country. The United States said imperialism and colonialism, that's for the British, that's for the French, that's for the Spanish, that's the old world. And the United States was like, we don't need to form colonies because we're taking over our own territories. We have our own subjects, blacks and Native Americans and a few Asians we let in. We have our own subjects. So the United States says we don't need to get entangled in the affairs of other nations. We'll just do us. We'll we got enough space within our own country to do land theft, genocide, systematic rape, slavery. We got enough territory to do white things within our white borders. We don't need to go to foreign nations. And whenever a politician, if you wanted to run for national office in the United States, you had to run and promise to keep United States out of foreign entanglements. We don't want Americans' blood spilt on foreign soil. That was the idea. This whole concept of America being the world policeman, the America sending its fighting forces and having bases outside of the territory of the United States, colonizing other lands, drone bombing other lands, all of that started with the Rough Riders. They were the first U.S. military regiment that got involved in imperialist military action on foreign soil. Prior to that, the U.S. military was formed to protect the physical integrity of the United States territory, not to go to other countries and impose their will. The United States at that time felt that they could negotiate with other nations through diplomacy and commerce, not through military imposition. It was the Rough Riders in 1898. Almost 100 years. Well, almost. The Rough Riders dropped in 19. Let me just confirm that. It's dark. Yeah. The Rough Riders dropped in 1997. The original white racist genocide Rough Riders formed in 1998. Missing 1 year. 99 years later, you go from the Rough Riders being a racist military regiment that laid the foundation for U.S. imperialism. And they didn't just lay the foundation for the physical act of U.S. military intervention and imperialism, the rhetoric and propaganda surrounding the Rough Riders. Look this up. That whole concept that the United States sends its military overseas to free people, that the United States military goes around the world with machine guns and bombs spreading democracy. That started with the Rough Riders. That started with Theodore Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. That is one of the most important fulcrums, or one of the most important historical points in United States history, not just military history, not just political history, but in cultural history and the very identity or concept of what people believe America to be. The beacon, the nation on a hill, the indispensable nation, as Obama called it. It started with the Rough Riders. So it kind of broke my heart that one of the most popular rap groups in 97, 98, pre 2000s, the most dominant and powerful hip hop group was bringing back, resurrecting this. And nobody was even talking about Rough Ride. And yeah, they didn't spell it Rough, they spelled it Ruff. But it's the same concept because the Rough Riders rode horses and the Rough Riders of the hip hop world rode motorcycles. But it was basically that same militant aggression, hyper masculine aggression of Theodore Roosevelt. And whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, I just didn't support that. So I could never really fully get into that whole area of hip hop. And all my homies, shout out to my homies. Oh my God, shout out to G, Rich. Shout out to we be in the club, banging our head. Y'all been eating long enough now. Stop being greedy. Keep it real, partner. Give to the needy. Ribs are touching. Don't make me wait. Mess around, I'm gonna bite you and snatch the plate. I'm like, man, this dude is hot. But he's out here with the rest of these cats. Got black kids screaming Rough Riders. I mean, maybe it's just me. Maybe y'all are sophisticated enough to detach and separate. Maybe it don't hit y'all like, but that bothers me. That's how my mind works. I can't be out here seeing somebody encouraging black kids, Rough Riders. Black people should be saying Rough Riders with utter disdain. And y'all be like, what is different and people separated? Do they though? It's kind of funny that y'all pretend like, oh yeah, it ain't the same. Like, then where did he get it from? And like I said, that hyper masculine, violent, I mean, a lot of elements. Is it just a coincidence that a lot of elements that were of the white racist Rough Riders, the destruction of black lives, you think I'm playing? You think this is a game? You think I'm playing till you're laying somewhere in a junkyard decaying, mom's at home praying, you're coming home, but you're not. You're sitting up in the trunk, starting to rot. I mean, DMX rapped about murder, violence, death. He even rapped about raping corpses. So you try to say, well, Rough Riders of the hip hop era ain't got nothing to do with Rough Riders of the early US imperialism. But killing black folks, raping corpses, is it just a coincidence that some of the same violent imagery and hyper violent masculinity that was invoked, attack dogs, imperialists from Spanish conquistadors to the British Empire, they would always use dogs. And fine, you go to most places like Jamaica, a lot of black folks got issues with dogs. It wasn't just they used dogs, the Rhodesian Ridgeback. Go look up the history of the Rhodesian Ridgeback. Everywhere you find white imperialism, you find attack dogs. Here was the German Shepherd for us, unleashed on water hoses. But in South Africa, Zimbabwe, the Congo, throughout Latin America, the British, French, German, even Portuguese, they all used attack dogs when they were engaged in imperialism. And then you go look at some Rough Rider videos, there's always vicious dogs. You look at how they're trying to hold back the pit bull from attacking, and then you look at Bull O'Connor and the civil rights movement holding back them German shepherds attacking before they unleash them, getting them more agitate the dog. That's when the dog is trying to pull at the chain and attack, and you pulling back at the dog. That increases the dog's adrenaline and aggression. So you tell people, man, you stretching. That's what they tell me. I'm stretching to make these connections. But when all the dots are lining up, but that's me. But I've never been a passive consumer of any media. I enjoy a plethora of media. Video games, music videos, trash animation, adult animation. All the blockbuster movies, Marvel verse, I eat it all up. Hip hop, but I don't passively consume nothing. I don't turn off my analytical, critical mind for nothing. Nobody. It's all I got. It's all they can't take from me. That's what they used to say. Oh, they can take everything. They can't take education, even though they can now. But that's another discussion. I digress. But I'm a be critical. But anyway, that's my own personal testimony, I suppose. Because nobody listened to me back then. I don't think anybody gonna listen to me now. But whether DMX recovers or we unfortunately lose a talented young brother to substance abuse, like we have so many other great Charlie Parker, Gil Scott Heron. You know, I'm not an artsy fartsy dude, so I'm not really an artist, so I don't understand. A lot of our artistic brothers and sisters fall to addiction. I don't know. Maybe it's something of how the mind is wired. Maybe we'll talk about addiction. I can share what I do know because I've been around it all my life. But anyway, um, we're gonna be hearing a lot of people go back reminiscing. There's gonna be resurgence of the Rough Riders. You're gonna be hearing a lot of Rough Rider music, Rough Riders, and a whole new generation are gonna be introduced to the Rough Riders. Right now at the hospital, there is a large gathering of the Rough Riders. They're out there, all the black folks, Rough Riders, and I would imagine that racist white people looking at black people running around talking about we Sicilians, we Rough Riders, and they laugh at us. I weep for us, our enemies laugh at us, and we mindlessly use these words and terms, and we try to pretend like the historical significance is lost or doesn't matter. But let's move on. We're gonna talk about Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley's man. I can maybe we'll come back to that. Let's move on. The mental thing. Let's move on. Noah Green was a young man who rammed into the Capitol and was shot by the Capitol Police. Um, anyway, this young man, and I don't really know that I gotta recount it, but a couple of days ago, brother drove a car up to the Capitol building, rammed two Capitol police officers who tried to hail him or get him to stop. He rammed into a barricade, jumped out the barricade with a knife, charged at the police, and was shot and killed. The two cops that he ran over with his vehicle were rushed to emergency medical services, and one of them has died and the other is recovering. And that was the story. Another day in America, the freest country in the world, highest rates of homicides and violence in the world. So, anyway, the other angle of this story is this young man, on his social media post prior to committing these acts, has stated that Allah has chosen me for other things, that Farrakhan was his spiritual father, and the media is having a field day with tying this young man to the Nation of Islam. And y'all hear me criticize Nation of Islam. Y'all hear me call it a cult. Y'all hear me disparage the Nation of Islam. But I can tell y'all this. The Nation of Islam had nothing to do with a young man committing acts of violence against the U.S. government. The Nation of Islam, I mean, yeah, they got a body count. And I used to say all the time, the Nation of Islam talks about the downfall of America and the Caucasus Mountain cave dwelling white devils, but they don't harm. They ain't white folks are the safe. White folks ain't never safer than when there are black Muslims around. They might catch hell from every other Islamic sect in the world. The United States can be at war with Islam and bombing the Holy Land, but no white folks are never. Let me tell you, white person, if you're listening to the BroDiallo Show, if you're in an area where you think you might be in danger, find you a brother in a bow tie. They might call you a devil. They might hurt your feelings, but they won't hurt you physically. And that's just been the way it was. Even in the time in its most militant era, Elijah Muhammad. They even, not only does the Nation of Islam seek to protect white folks physically, they want to protect white folks psychologically. Despite all that militant rhetoric, after JFK got shot, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad said, don't say anything, don't speak on it. America's hurting. And we don't want the white devil to add to the white devil's pain. And Malcolm X said, well, Kennedy was a man involved green lighting tragedies. Because back in Kennedy's day, there were no drone bombers. So if you wanted to bomb people to death, millions of people, you had to send a pilot over. And Kennedy had no qualms about engaging in U.S. imperial atrocities. And so he said, you got a man who ordered the death of people all over Laos and Cambodia and perpetuating wars of aggression and in the name of fighting communism or stopping communists, he's harming and disrespecting the sovereignty of people all over the world. So when a dude like that gets shot, he said his chicken's coming home to roost. You can't propagate violence around the world and then act shocked when violence shows up at your doorstep. And Malcolm didn't say all that I said. He just said, they said, what do you think about Kennedy? And he said his chicken's coming home to roost. And he was like, you deal with the rest. He didn't even give the details like I'm giving as to why he said it. And that, quote unquote, was the popular myth about what caused the rift between the Nation of Islam and Malcolm, because Malcolm was silent, because the Nation of Islam policy then and now was to have very strong rhetoric that did not align with the actions. Now, if you were a black person talking greasy about the NOI back then and even now, people would be afraid for you. I've been active since I was 14 years old. And I don't know if you were an activist, and especially in the 90s, you didn't do nothing in the black community in terms of activism, black empowerment, black liberation, black radicalism that the nation wasn't in some way a part of. You had the Black Radical Coalition, the National Black United Front. Conrad Roarwill and Minister Farrakhan were best of friends before Conrad passed. And you go to a club, it'd be Nation of Islam security. Many of our rappers, when they got in trouble, when Malcolm X got in trouble, whenever a black public figure or celebrity got in trouble in the 90s, first thing you see him show up with in public was the brothers in the bow ties. People who respected their discipline. Many of them were trained. Khalid Muhammad trained Fruit of Islam, Public Enemy back in the day, the most dangerous group in America, the most dangerous musical group in the world. You look at their old photos, they're surrounded by the brothers in the bow tie. So people in the black community knew that the Nation of Islam represented an air of danger, aggression, militancy, weapons, harm. But white folks, nope. Not white folks. You don't touch. That was their official policy. You don't touch white folks. If you don't believe me, look it up. That should be my BroDiallo show. If you don't believe me, look it up. I need to put that on my merch. So I know for a fact this brother was a lone wolf acting of his own, under his own direction, because the nation seeks to do no harm and commits no acts of aggression against the United States or white folks in general. That has never been their policy. Despite all their rhetoric, despite publishing books for over 60 years that are calling for the downfall of America, that's something that Allah is supposed to do without their direct support. So, I mean, it's tragic, but you see it in the media. I don't know if this is a defense or a condemnation, depending on how you see it. That if you look up Noah Green, you Google Noah Green and Nation of Islam, and they're just like, oh, follower of Farrakhan, Nation of Islam. It's all over the place. They trying to tie this dude and Farrakhan's old enemies, the Southern Christian Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League and B'nai B'rith, all these organizations. Oh, we got a Nation of Islam terrorists and all these groups, these liberal groups, the Nation of Islam terrorists. But the FBI and the National Security Agency is like, ain't no such thing as a Nation of Islam. There's a lot of Islamic terrorists, but we ain't got no Nation of Islam terrorists. The Nation of Islam ain't about to do nothing to harm the U.S. government, for better or for worse. Now, if you a brother in the hood talking greasy, then you better watch your back. But if you are part of the empire, a part of the great Satan, you good. You good. So don't let them tell the lies. But one thing I do want to say is that I was reading about this Noah Green guy, and he started going through some things. He was just, he played football, first of all, so they might want to check for CTE. You know, they might want to check for brain swelling and mental and psychological damage because he was a football player. So a lot of these football players, this CTE thing. And also, he said that he was poisoned or drugged, or he believed that he was, and he was a healthy, athletic guy, and he started having seizures and other physical ailments. So he was actually documenting his psychological and physical deterioration on social media. And there were really no interventions as far as I know. There were some family members that invited him to come stay with him, and they said that, they saw him change. And he claims that at one point someone had given him some illicit drugs without his knowledge, and he immediately got away from that person. And that's the thing. DMX said the same thing. I had a homie, one time I was in the club. It wasn't even a club, it was a hotel room, but it was a party, like a hotel room party. Dozens of people, loud music and stuff. And this really pretty girl came up and handed my homie a joint. And this was, back in the day. We were still in high school, in fact. And, the joints were these little white things, all that blunts and all those sophisticated things. It was some old zigzag paper roll joint, just a regular old school joint from the 70s. That's all we knew because our parents used to use the zigzag papers and used to roll those little skinny white joints. And so we would just do what they do. We didn't know about them. But anyway, I didn't smoke or drink. But somebody handed my homie just a regular joint. He took a puff and passed it back. And he thought he just smoked a little weed. Turns out it wasn't just weed in there. I ain't gonna put all the business out there. But later the girl came back and whispered something in his ear, and he looked like he turned white pale, like, yo, why you give me that? So that happens a lot. More than you probably, there's more awareness about people being slipped drugs unawares because of date rape. Thanks to Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby did two good things. Number one, he sent a bunch of Negroes to Morehouse free of tuition. Now I don't know where Bill Cosby was supposed to go he was supposed to revive Du Bois' Talented Tenth and send a bunch of Negroes off to higher learning and pay their tuition, and they were going to come back in top hats and monocles and tell us how to be proper Negroes and succeed in America. But I don't know where none of the Cosby kids are. That's one thing he did. Paid a whole bunch of tuition for a whole bunch of upper class Negroes that probably didn't need his help anyway. I didn't get no Cosby money. And number two, he made us aware about slipping people drugs. He brought that back to our awareness. Roofies and stuff. So slipping people drugs is a thing that people do. I don't understand it. If you want to play a joke on somebody, get like a pie crust and put shaving cream and make it look like a cream pie, but it's really shaving cream. Ha ha, that's a joke. Giving somebody drugs without their knowledge is a crime. But anyway, that's what this young man said. He got these drugs, he was deteriorating, and as he was declining mentally and physically, At the same time, he started looking into Nation of Islam. And he wasn't just following Farrakhan. This young man was going back to read Elijah Muhammad and watch Elijah Muhammad recordings. He was talking about Master Farad Muhammad. He was getting deep into a cycle of Nation of Islam rhetoric and ideology. And a lot of y'all are believe in the myth that Nation of Islam has lifted so many brothers up. But if you lift somebody up on a lie and a myth, then that upliftment is fragile. If you can't, the foundation wasn't sound for the mission, as Willie D said. So I don't believe in telling people myths that God is there for you, or that God will heal you, or that you are God unto yourself, or that mystical, magical forces. And somebody was like, wow, I'm going to base my sobriety. I'm going to base my recovery. I'm going to base my mental health on something that is fake as hell. Because even if you start doing better because you believe that Master Farad Muhammad was God in person and came down to the most honorable Elijah Muhammad to give him a message, all made up fake stuff, and that's what your sanity or your well-being is founded in, it's very fragile. As we have seen, many brothers cycle into and out of these various cults and organizations, and you meet somebody that their first 6 months joining the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're the kindest, most mindful people. Hello, yes. Mm-hmm. But after they in there for a while, they go regress even worse than when they went into it. One of my favorite self quotes, I'll quote myself: cults don't cultivate. And a lot of times we want these shortcuts. We have a young man that's going through something, a young sister with problems. We want to send them off to these various cult groups to get this love bombing ideology and go through the cult initiation and mind warping. And we like, well, at least they ain't on drugs anymore. But the drug is the symptom. The underlying mental dysfunction is still there. But now you ain't smoking weed, you're wearing you're not drinking, you're eating bean pies and wearing a bow tie, problem solved. We got to stop that. But one thing I will show up at, Nation, Farrakhan, call me as a character witness. If they try to go too far with this, right now they're just using it as propaganda, anti-black propaganda. Even though, like a lot of the liberal and old school enemies of the nation are really running with this. It's like that one dude that shot those cops, and he had a picture of himself with Professor Griff. And some of the media outlets tried to play that up. Oh, public enemy and violence, killer cops. No. So it's all the things I've said, critiques and criticisms I leveled against the nation. On this case, y'all can call me in as a character witness, because I know y'all ain't told nobody to do no harm to a white devil. Now, when it came to Malcolm, because if it goes too far, Nation is playing it the way I would say playing it. They don't have to hire me, because I say nothing. Something else will happen, the news will recycle, and a new news cycle will emerge, and people will have forgotten about it. But if they're forced to say something, if there's certain sanctions coming down, or other, more prominent voices latch on to this connection between capital terror and Nation of Islam, they're going to denounce it. Like when they killed Malcolm, they say, we dealt with Malcolm like a traitor was supposed to deal with a traitor, and it's none of your business. That's what they said when they murdered Malcolm in front of his wife and children. But when it comes to this, I'm pretty sure it'll be a whole different tone. Oh, well, we denounce violence. We blah, blah, blah. They denounce it. So cults don't cultivate. But I ain't going to, even if I have my issues with the nation and Islam and cults in general, and the minister specifically, I ain't going to let them tell this lie. I ain't going to let you lie on our brothers over there. All right. Let's go. I guess we have to. Oh, let me just say one thing before we go into the topic. I'm being a little self-indulgent. The trial for the murderer of George Floyd is going on. And you'll notice that um, they keep recounting the atrocities. Like I hear journalists who are at the courthouse saying that they're talking about what Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd. They opened up the court case with the video of Derek kneeling on brother Floyd's neck and Floyd calling out that he can't breathe, calling out for mama. And they said it was very powerful. And then they had these other people coming on the stand who witnessed the act and giving play by play, blow by blow. They even had a little boy come on there, a young child, and you know how their small voices, you know how children talk. And he told, man, it was powerful. And the journalists are like, well, the defense, what are they doing? You know, they're not objecting. They're not fighting. They're just letting all this happen. They're not even cross-examining the witnesses. And you know what that made me think of? The Rodney King trial. And what happened I'm not saying this is what happened here, but this is what happened back then that maybe we want to think about as they wrap this case up. With the Rodney King trial, the defense of the 4 officers who assaulted Rodney King, their tactic was let me see if I can say this word, desensitization, to desensitize the jury to the tape. Because when the world saw that tape, everyone was horrified. I mean, the Rodney King tape. Now, unfortunately, in 2021, a Rodney King tape probably wouldn't even get as much attention because now we're seeing people shot down in cold blood. But in 1992, the video, there was no internet, there was no YouTube, there was no Twitter, there were no hashtags. So for a video to go viral, people had to pass around a VHS tape. That was a VCR, these big ass tapes that were like 3 times the size of the biggest cell phone. These big plastic tapes that were rather delicate. They broke easily. And you had to put that sucker in a VCR and play it. So to get a video that everybody saw, it was nothing for a video. You seen that video? Everybody saw that video. Y'all saw that video. Let me send you this video. And somebody can send you a video and it's in your back pocket and you can replay it, remix it. That was not 1992. 1992, that video hit people like a ton of bricks because there were no viral videos back then. And videos being recorded. And then there were jokes. If you go back and look, people would walk around with these big ass camcorders. Back then, if you wanted to take a video on the street, you needed a separate battery pack and a 15 to 20 pound camera to mount on your shoulder. So it was very rare to catch these things on tape, unlike now. Police brutality was happening back then, but it wasn't on tape. The only thing we got as evidence of police brutality back then was the mangled dead bodies of black folks. We didn't have no tape to accompany. So anyway, this tape was the tape literally heard and seen around the world. One of the first viral videos of all time. Like the Hindenburg crash video, like everybody has seen that. And what the defense did was say, we're going to play this tape and let the jury see the tape. And it went from being an emotionally impactful thing to being a technical piece of evidence. They desensitized the people. And they were like, the tape shows that we're guilty. So we can't argue against the evidence. And since we can't argue against the evidence, we want to desensitize the jury. So they just kept playing the tape and playing the tape and playing the tape. And then they would slow the tape down. And then they would highlight segments of the tape. And they would play the tape in reverse and play the tape. And by the time the trial was wrapped up, the reporters said that the jury just didn't, the emotional impact was gone, just watching it over and 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 over. To where the horror, I don't know if you watch horror movies, but let's say your favorite horror movie, your favorite gore movie, and you know what's coming. You don't get scared. You see a horror movie, the first time you jump, oh my goodness, you're under the cover. You watch with one eye. Second time you watch it, oh man, I didn't notice that. Third time, fourth time. Imagine watching the same horror movie 50 times within a week. Are you going to be jumping? Are you going to be covering your eyes? Are you going to be feeling a little queasy? No. You become desensitized. So I'm just saying, it kind of looks like that's what, because the defense is like, what are we gonna say? You didn't lean on his neck, you didn't call. So let's just let it all, just all day, horror, 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 nightmare, horror, 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 nightmare, over and over in the courtroom. And then and at the same time you're hearing horror and nightmare, we'll be talking about technicalities. They're literally arguing that when he called mama, when Derek had his neck on George's neck, he said, Mama. And the defense is like, well, in his phone, his girlfriend at the time, her name was Mama. So was he calling for his biological mother, or was it that his pet name for his girlfriend? Because a lot of brothers like, hey, daddy, hey, mama, that's a pet name for an intimate partner. And those are what they're doing. Like they're taking this horror and they injecting this technical evaluation, this sterile technical dissection of it to desensitize. And it worked in the Rodney King trial. And that's what it smells like is going on here. So people are literally like, this is so horrible. There's no way he can get off. This is and the testimony and the testimony. But we're not in the courtroom. We're taking in every day. Those jurors are going in there seeing the same horrible thing. So it just looks like a repeat of their tactic. These people, man, the bugger got no shame. One more thing. There's so much to talk about. Another thing I find curious. Sometimes I share with y'all, I try to explain things to y'all, but sometimes I need y'all to explain things to me. So Pepe Le Pew was taken out of the Space Jam 2 uh, movie. I didn't care about that. But yesterday I watched the preview of they said they took Pepe Le Pew out because Pepe Le Pew is a sexual aggressor, I guess. And I used to really like those Pepe. That was one of my favorite Looney Tunes was Pepe Le Pew, and he'd be chasing. It was a black cat, but he didn't know it was cat. He thought it was a skunk. And every time this unfortunate black cat would somehow get a white streak down her back through paint or something, and it would look like a skunk. But when Pepe Le Pew would come and try to holler at the cat would start to smell how much Pepe Le Pew stunk. And so he didn't want to hook up with Pepe Le Pew because he stunk. And so he would chase her around and give her flowers and try to entice her and hug and kiss on her. And the whole time she's running hysterical as a child. And I find that people are more alert and aware of images and they are more sensitive about how such images potentially impact children. Go figure, I don't know. But they took it out because it's a bad image for young people. So they took Pepe Le Pew out. I don't care. Could care less. I support cancel culture anyway, so I don't care. But then I just clicked on the Space Jam thing, watched the 2-minute preview, and they got Yosemite Sam in there, and Bugs Bunny says to Yosemite Sam, "Shoot the basketball," and somebody tosses the ball into the court, and Yosemite Sam pulls out 2 revolvers and pumps like 50 slugs into these basketball. Pow, 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 shooting the gun. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, wait a second. Hold up. Wait a minute. Wait a cotton picking minute. America's weird. This is a weird nation. I know it's racist. I know it's genocidal and ecocidal. But the weirdness of America, man. Like, you can't show a titty on a screen, but you can show somebody literally getting their brains blown out. You have to take away the character that aggressively pursues a love interest, but you can keep the character that is so violence prone that he shoots a basketball in a full arena full of people in a society where there are almost daily mass shootings. weirdos, skeezers. Man, this is a nation full of skeezers. Y'all a bunch of skeezers. I can't. I need to shorten my notes. I need to better edit my notes, y'all. Is this thing on? Let me see. Test it. Maybe if I. Does that sound better? No, it doesn't actually. I'm just messing with buttons here. Don't even mind me. I'm doing this live on the air because I'm a professional. Does that sound? I just push some buttons to see what would happen. Anyway, I'm doing the best I can. Let's just get through today's show. Wow. I hope I don't have to do a part two of this. But today's show is called Freedom Isn't Liberation. And I'm saying this because there are a lot of people. It seems like everybody, even Uncle Tom, Coon, handkerchief head, Negro sellouts like Charles Barkley. Everybody now is on black empowerment. Everybody's supporting reparations. Everybody's for black unity. I remember a time when Uncle Tom stayed on their side of the fence and the pro-black people, we had our side. And we didn't mix. We all had our job to do. But now every black person talking about they want freedom. Every black person is proud of their African heritage. Even Uncle Tom, I bet you if we could get Clarence Thomas to come up off that bench and talk to us, he'd say he's a proud black man, proud of his heritage. And I mean, like, everybody's like, how do we have all these black folks down for freedom and black empowerment and black unity, but our conditions and our collective standing is worsening? Why? How are we been free for half a century and still struggling with the same problems we were dealing with under Jim Crow? How are we over a century out of slavery and still got more black men under forced uncompensated labor now than we did at the beginning of the Civil War? So we got all this freedom, but yet we ain't free. What's up with that? So that's kind of what I want to talk about. And especially since everybody, it's in vogue to be pro-black. And when I saw Barkley stand up and people are like, Barkley is breaking it down. And Barkley says the Democrats and the GOP and the Republicans are dividing America. And everybody wants black people to do well, even our most long-standing Uncle Tom sellout handkerchief head Negroes. What the hell is going on? What am I missing? And I should be celebrating, right? Now, black folks, we all getting on the same page. We don't have those pernicious Uncle Toms that say black folks are their own worst enemy. Black people are, the Uncle Toms are learning to you. But of course, this is the new Negro. Khalid Muhammad told us before he passed in one of his last lectures was on the new Negro. He said the old Uncle Tom that used to wear the suit and tie, the old Uncle Tom that used to drape himself in the American flag, now that same Uncle Tom with the same mentality and the same agenda, he's now going to wear kente cloth. He's going to adopt an African name. He is going to talk about his love of black people, and he's going to have to talk about his love of a black woman. At the same time, he's doing everything in his or her power to subvert the interests of black people, like Obama. So maybe if black people start to understand, because we are celebrating our freedom, feeling ourselves, that we need to understand that freedom is not liberation. And literally, our oppressors devised a means and a technology and a social structures to grant people, black folks, literally almost unlimited freedom, but absolutely no liberation. So, and there's a lot of people out here in the black community selling us freedom through entrepreneurship, through education, through amassing fiat, through representation in the media as signs or evidence of our power. And these are hustles. We can have all of that and still be enslaved. And I hate, in one of the books I think that best lays this out, what I'm talking about here is Beyond Freedom and Dignity, was written at the tail end of the civil rights movement, when it was pretty much inevitable that black folks were either going to get our civil and human rights or there was to be no America. We was going to burn this country down. And we had allies all over the world that were willing to support and aid us in bringing down America if we didn't get our rights. So the United States says we got to give the colored man his rights. We got to give the colored man his due. So they were like, but we ain't trying to give up our empire. We ain't trying to give up our status. So how we do this and not do it at the same time? So B.F. Skinner, one of their brilliant scientists, came up with a plan employing communal psychology, mass psychology, and behaviorism to say, hey, we can give black folks all the rights and freedoms they could ever ask for, but make sure they don't utilize those new freedoms and rights and assets to harm us. And in fact, we can use it where they start to finance and support some of the agendas and conditions that go against their own interests of their own people. So, even though black people have secured racial integration, even though black people in the United States have some of the highest amounts of earnings, amounts of fiat wealth, even though black people are making headway in representation, that new Space Jam movies where you can't hug up on a woman without her consent, but you can shoot up a crowded stadium in the same kids movie, was produced by Ryan Coogler, starring LeBron James. So now we got black producers for black-led movies. We got representation, Black Panther. You know, all this stuff is coming. But when we look beneath the cover of all this black excellence, all this achievement, all these wonderful historical moments, we see a people with low or declining life expectancy. We see traditionally black communities being obliterated through gentrification. We see high rates of drug abuse, chronic disease, literally every social indicator. I mean, it kind of frustrates me now. People say, black people are dying more of coronavirus than any other population. I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't mean to be insensitive, but yeah, of course. Every social indicator. Black people are paying higher interest rates on loans, even though they have higher credit score. We're paying highest interest rate on loans. Black property is being devalued and valued at lower rates than white property. Black schools are underfunded. Black amputations are skyrocketing. There's a pandemic of black amputations for type 2 diabetes. Every segment, every single social indicator. Y'all act like oppression ain't oppressive. We dwell under oppression. You work your job, you go to your church, you find yourself a significant other, and you court them, and y'all fall in love, and y'all go on Caribbean vacations and go shopping for engagement rings together. You get your hair did, nails did, you get your hair lined up, you go to the bar and buy your cigar, you go to the Harley Davidson and buy your motorcycle so you can ride with the Rough Riders. You do all this stuff under oppression. Oppression just plays in the background. It's not even something that is part of our daily routine consciousness. And when people like me, when I walk into spaces and be like, hey, black folks, we oppressed, you know, by and large, people be like, man, get your money, dog. Don't trip off of that. Do you? But then whenever we're confronted and we have to look at the documentation to say, well, black man, even though you got the bag, even though you got Cuban cigars, and you live in the nicest neighborhood. And hell, you even get to have a white woman on your arm and not worry about the white boy coming to lynch you. Your life expectancy, your potential to suffer from violent homicide, mental health, throat cancer, what every single social indicator, brother, you still on the bottom. You could be the expert in your field, the best in your field, but you still gonna be about 15 percentage points under the white boy in terms of what you get. And if you're a black female achiever or a black female girl magic, you can be anywhere to 30 to 45% under what the white boy gets. Cause y'all still being shocked, y'all still being outraged because y'all seem to believe that you can thrive under oppression. And the way you want to deal with this, because you are as invested in the system, you are receiving dividends and benefits from the system, from imperialism and racism and genocide. You don't want an institutional struggle, because if an institutional struggle was successful, you would not receive the many benefits that you've come to enjoy. It could disrupt your comfort under oppression. So we want to fight incidents. We don't want to fight institutions. We want to fight incidents of police brutality. We don't want to deal with the institution of European imperialism, militarism, and policing. We want to deal with incidents of housing discrimination. We don't want to deal with the institution of the housing market and the very corrupt concept of private property ownership. We want to deal with incidents of rape and sexual assault, but we don't want to deal with the institution of patriarchy and institutions, religious institutions that say that women are nothing more than property of men, breeding stock, that the woman is an embodiment of lust and the downfall of man. You don't want to deal with the institutions that develop these attitudes towards women that lead to a rape culture. You only want to deal with incidents. You don't want to deal with institutions. So all my life as an activist, we're just waiting. We're going to sit back and rest and see how this Derek Chauvin trial plays out. And if there's an incident of him being found not guilty, we'll rise up for a week or two. Or we'll wait for let's say he's convicted, uprising, rebellion averted. We'll just wait and go about our lives with oppression playing in the background until another televised black atrocity occurs. And when I say televised black atrocity, it's going to have to be within the confines of the United States, because the atrocities that the U.S. military is committing all over our globe against our African brothers and sisters, that don't register until they come here. Until our African brothers and sisters, our Haitian, Caribbean brothers and sisters, the black people from Latin America come here as refugees, escaping U.S. imperialism by coming to the U.S. And then y'all want to talk about ADOS, they trying to get our rights. So y'all allow the oppressor to attack them overseas, and then when they come here as refugees or foreigners, then you attack them for coming to take your job. And this is all by design. All the freedom that black people have, the rights, the mobility, the access, the opportunity, we utilize to further entrench ourselves in the systems and institutions of white domination, capitalism, and oppression. The more freedom we get, the less liberated we are. Because we use that money, we use that education, we use those resources to shore up the system, because we become more dependent and more expectant of the benefits from that system. So we got people like Killer Mike out here talking about black banks are the solution. We had black banks 120 years ago. If black banks was going to solve anything, we would have solved them. Right now, we got black people trying to rebuild Black Wall Street. Literally trying to that's like rebuilding the Titanic. Didn't it fail once? And I looked at some of these Black Wall Street hustles and hustlers, and I don't see any provisions in there that didn't exist when it happened before. That's why I say freedom is not liberation. Integration, amassing fiat, representation in the system, whether that's a black CEO, a black Supreme Court justice, a black president, or a black superhero, don't mean a goddamn thing. And I hate being this dude, man. I wish, Lord have his mercy, I wish I could be that guy. I don't like being the dude who don't get to lock arms and dance in the street with the hood. I hate that so many of the things that my community celebrate, I have to fold my arms. And shout out to my man, Black Star, the Underground King. Shout out to Eon. He would call me the Black Grinch. Because whenever I'd come on the show, I'd have to, be the party pooper. Or as I say, I have to deflate the tires on the bandwagon. I can't go there with you. I can't go there because I understand it's not enough. It's inadequate. We need to stop going from incident to incident and start institutional critique, institutional rebellion, sustained rebellion. Right now, we have sporadic outbursts. If we find some famous white person use the N-word, we're going to mobilize. We're going to get that person canceled. We're going to deplatform. But sporadic outbursts in response to racist incidents is inadequate. We need sustained resistance targeted against institutions. Even when there is no hashtag, even when there is currently no trending videotape of a white atrocity, but I mean, there will always be. Marvin Scott, a black man, 7 officers arrested this black man because he had a few little marijuana seeds, cannabis seeds in his pocket. They took this black man into a prison, into a jail, maced him, sprayed, not mace, what is that? Yeah, the pepper sprayed, not mace over, and then they put a hood over the black man's head. If you've ever, I've had tear gas. I've never gotten like the military grade, but I've had the tear gas where they shoot them thing and the powder. I've had that. I used to be a protester. So I've sucked in tear gas before. It ain't no joke. And I just can't imagine. And I know what those hoods look like. I worked at Rikers Island as an allied health professional in the Rikers Island infirmary. I know what those hoods look like because sometimes the inmates, when they're restrained, their feet are shackled, their arms are shackled, they might be strapped down to a gurney, and all they have are their voice, their mouth. They yell, they curse, sometimes they spit. So they put these hood on there to keep you from biting and spitting, because when you treat a man like an animal, he's going to act like a goddamn animal. But anyway, this man died. So even when I say when there's no active atrocity, there's atrocities happening daily. But in the in-between time, the downtime where we're not in the streets making money for Black Lives Matter, when we're not in the streets in such a way that Black Lives Matters can profit from our pain, we need ongoing resistance. Freedom is not enough. If I wasn't on the radio, I would say F freedom. Take this freedom and shove it. Remember that Johnny Paycheck, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. And everybody wants a job. Who don't want a job? You you go to school, you spend your whole childhood preparing yourself for a job. So for somebody to make a song saying, take this job and shove it, that seems counterintuitive. Like, take this job and give it to me. Hire me for it. I'll do it for you, boss. Give it. Give me it. So I say, to borrow from Johnny Paycheck, the black community needs to get to the point where we say, take this freedom and shove it. I ain't submitting to the system no more. Shove it. F this freedom. If it's a freedom that's perpetuating and even Amos Wilson said, we believe that we're free. We love freedom. We fought for freedom. We died, bled for freedom. But how come it's just a coincidence that in the exercise of our freedom, it just so happens that everything we do and identify as an exercise or an expression of our freedom happens to be things that profit our oppressors. I can get whatever kind of purse I want. I could drive whatever car I want to drive. I could buy whatever mansion I want. We only want to consume the things that they make and allow for us. We just don't, out of coincidence, don't happen to want anything they don't want us to have. By design, beyond freedom and dignity. So, what is freedom? What is true freedom, or what I would call liberation? You're free to consume. You're free to go to their schools and be indoctrinated into their ideas. You're free to go to their houses of worship and praise their colonial gods. You're free to move into their neighborhoods. You're free to marry and procreate with their children. Your children are, you can get a spouse. You're free to enlist in their military and rise to the highest ranks and even pilot their drone over the African continent and obliterate other black bodies. You got all these goddamn freedoms, but you ain't liberated. And let me tell you something else about what real resistance, because there's a couple of incidents in history where people were occupied or under the control of another people. And those occupiers improved the life. They improved the lives of the people they invaded. But those people were like, I would rather live in poverty. I would rather starve under my own power than to eat well under your power. One of those instances is the Moors. Everybody likes to talk about the Moors. When the Afro-Arab sect of Islamicists went into Southern Europe, Spain, Portugal, for 700 years, they brought everything from bathing to advances in medical treatment to freedom to literacy. Hygiene and literacy alone should have made sure the Europeans embraced the Moors forevermore. And all the historical texts, even the European, Eurocentric historians alike, when the Moors came, they improved. They brought Europe out of the Dark Ages. They brought advancements. They brought scientific theories and arithmetic, art, high culture. There was a time when Spain was the chief imperial state because of the impact of the Moors. But those Europeans was like, I'd rather be in the white dark ages than live in a black or Arab renaissance. I don't give a damn. Take this advancement, take this culture, take this civilization and shove it. We'd rather live in squalor under our own terms than live in abundance under your leadership and your occupation of our country. Get your ass out of here. Another time, a more recent example, when the USSR and the Soviet Union went into Afghanistan. They modernized Afghanistan's infrastructure. For the first time, they increased Afghanistan's literacy rate. They built schools. They built water sanitation. They brought improvements and advancements in agriculture. And the Afghani people was killing them and slitting their throats at every opportunity. And even Western journalists, Michael Parenti writes about this. Even Western journalists would go into Afghanistan under Soviet occupation and say, wow, I was expecting to come here to see a war zone, but I see a vibrant community. Why are you fighting these people? He's like, because they're not Afghan. Because they're not us. They're not they don't follow our culture, they don't worship our God, and they can take all these schools, all these water treatment plants, all this modern industrial agriculture, they can take all this and take that stuff right back to Russia, because we're going to fight them until they do. Because some groups of people, for better or worse, realize the difference between freedom and liberation. And you can have all kinds of freedom and rights and opportunities and access while you're under the thumb and control and ownership of another people. So, what is liberation? As African people, if we really want to be truly free, these are things we need to be securing besides getting that paper. Multi-generational wealth. I'm starting to hate that word. I used to love that word, multi-generational wealth. I used to love reparations. But now those two concepts have really been corrupted. They've been deteriorated. Multi-generational wealth means that I get to sign over some banknotes. I get to transfer some cryptocurrency over to you after I die. Even though the ocean is acidified, the polar bears are extinct, the land is no longer viable to grow and cultivate food in. You can't even walk out into the sun because the ozone layer is depleted or the air is so goddamn toxic. But we're going to leave you a whole bunch of money. What's money? It's this paper that the white man printed that we earned through cooperating with the white man in building his system and entrenching his power. I mean, how many times do we look at these zombie movies or these apocalyptic movies while everybody else is trying to purify water, trying to find a patch of clean land to cultivate soil, and there's the one crazy man with a suitcase full of money. They're trying to run from the zombie, and one guy's running from the society is completely collapsed. There's one guy holding on to this artificial means of wealth, this symbol of wealth. And that's always portrayed as the crazy guy in the movie. But all of us are that goddamn crazy right now. And reparations used to be, but I digress. Let me not even get into that. Let me just explain some things what freedom looks like. What true freedom, i.e. liberation, as opposed to right to elevate within the systems of your oppressor, as opposed to being independent and free from the systems of your oppressor. Number one, denuclearization. The nuclear infrastructure of nuclear weapons needs to be demobilized and dismantled. I don't care where you are on this planet, as long as one group of white capitalists has the capacity to kill every living person on the planet, ain't none of y'all free. So the nuclear weapons need to be demobilized. All the nuclear subs, nuclear silos need to be shut the blood clot down. And you can align with most. There are white people that agree with this. There's no purpose or need or reason for the humanity to have nuclear weapons. The U.S. has to close all 200 plus foreign military bases. Okinawa, Germany, Guantanamo Bay, all of the new AFRICOM bases, the Green Zone in Iraq, all foreign military bases. And I know some of y'all thinking, what? How that gonna put money in my pocket? Because you a goddamn slave. If you don't understand what freedom looks like, you don't understand what liberation is, and you consume, you think that hyper consumption and mass accumulation of fiat is freedom, then you're part of the problem. So yeah, these things that I'm talking about, real freedom, not all of them are going to put money in your pocket, but they're going to allow for the earth to continue to sustain life for you and your descendants. If your generation, literally, the planet is being deoxygenated. Go and Google deoxygenation. The saturation and concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere is being reduced because of the extinction of plant life and the reduction of phytoplankton, which is the basis of not only the oxygen, but the basis of the food chain for the whole planet is being depleted and is on the verge of being destroyed. And you talking about multi-generational wealth when you don't even live on a planet that is primed to survive another 2 or 3 generations of Western domination and capitalism. So yes, denuclearization, demilitarization, closing of all foreign military bases, a total recoil, a total extraction of the global military infrastructure and imperialism. That's what liberation looks like. If you're enjoying your freedom under nuclear halos, under nuclear potential for nuclear extinction, how is that freedom? Just don't think about it. They don't have the nukes on my block. The nukes are somewhere in some rural Kansas. The nukes are in North Dakota somewhere. The nukes are in the middle of the desert or buried in a mountain silo in the Appalachians. So those are the demilitarization, denuclearization, closing of all foreign military bases. Liberation is also debt jubilee. See, that puts some money in your pocket. All foreign debts, all debts accumulated under colonialism, under neo-colonialism, under the threat of military occupation and subversion, all debts incurred by non-democratically elected or imposed leaders, by dictators and puppet regimes, all that debt gets erased immediately, including your debt, student loan, and all that, but a total debt jubilee. Relocalization of economies. No more economies organized or constructed for profit. Economies, manufacturing, and distribution, the sole priority is to answer human need and to enrich human lives, whether or not someone can generate profit from it. The only reason they have to ship mason jars from China or Tibet to the United States is for centralization and concentration and direct control of the global economy by a few industries and a few individuals for maximization of profit. That needs to be destroyed. Profit is theft. We need to eliminate profit and the profit motive from the economy. I know this sounds crazy because you're so well indoctrinated. How are you going to have profit? I just had some crazy white person say capitalism is the natural state of humanity. If it was, you wouldn't have to fight so many goddamn wars to sustain capitalism if it was a natural state. You don't have to fight wars to make people have sex because sex is natural. You have to pry people apart. We humans have some people are primates. We gonna do it. You have to pry us apart and tell us that God will burn us for eternity if we do it. You got to go through all this to get people to refrain from sex. But you got to force people to do capitalism, please. You have to dissolve the UN Security Council. You need true global democracy. Dissolve the UN Security Council. And I know that might seem like a minor thing, but the UN Security Council. We also need a repeat of what is called the Berlin Council, where in 1885, where they divvied up Africa. I propose there be an Accra Council where the leaders of the African nations and the leaders of the African representatives of the African diaspora come sit down and redraw the political, geographical, economic lines and ties on the African continent. The African continent needs to be restructured totality. We need an African reformation continent wide. We will not be able to stabilize Africa with the current border economic relationships, and the colonial legacy needs to be obliterated and purged. And my time is up. Man, I can't get through my list. We can revisit this and we'll do it in the Q&A. But anyway, let me just tell you, every time you turn on your TV and you hear some black first, You hear some black achievement, some black excellence, then hear a report on the newest black billionaire. Man, let me tell you, that don't mean nothing to nothing, nobody. Freedom ain't liberation, and we need liberation. And I'll leave you with this thought, even though I'm going a little over my time. Sorry, Q4. Amos Wilson said the greatest asset any people can have is a sound ideology. Our ideology is our asset. So whenever you hear about a black achievement, say, what is the ideology? When you hear about a black 13-year-old kid getting a scholarship to MIT, and this black kid has a chess master and has the highest ever IQ ever recorded, what is that little homie's ideology? Because all this black money going through black hands, all this opportunity coming to black people, all this status that black people have, if they don't have the proper ideology, what is their social theory? How do they see the world being structured? What is their vision? What do they deem to be the proper and just ways for humans to interact with other humans and for humanity to engage with the ecosystems in our environment? What the blood clot is your ideology? I don't care about what you have achieved or what you got or what you offer. What is the fundamental ideology that drives you, that motivates you, that you're going to put your time and resources to? And 99.9% of the time, I don't care if it's Obama or Jay-Z or Bay or any of these black people who we hashtag goals, their ideology is whack. So even if they achieve everything they claim to strive for, it will leave us in the same or worse condition. Ideology is all. And our ideology needs to be radical, revolutionary, pan-Africanist. And if you can come up with a better ideology than that, I'm willing to hear it. Holla. Anyway, BroDiallo Show, Q4 Radio. You can please support to sustain all that, but I'm over my time and I apologize for that. And I was a little too, again, self-indulgent and didn't stick to my little schedule. But we'll try again next week. We'll be back again with another BroDiallo broadcast. Please support the BroDiallo Show. Please give a shout out and show your appreciation and support for the Q4 Radio family, the Q4 Radio infrastructure. We going through it right now, y'all, but we going to try to maintain and hold on. Anyway, I guess that's it. Y'all have a good morning. Have a productive day. Free all political prisoners.